Victor Reyes pressed a pistol to Elena Jackson's temple, right on her front porch, under the searing noon sun, as neighbors peeked from their lawns. No questions, no just cause. Only because Elena, a black woman, refused to tear down the stone wall around her home that Victor called a stain on Riverside Heights. A self-styled head of neighborhood security, flashing a badge bought online, he strutted as if the law was his toy. Such raw abuse of power seemed like a scene from a gritty crime drama, until Elena's wrists were bound with zip ties before her own door. But that day, Victor pushed the wrong woman too far, and when lies unravel, a false king pays a bitter price. If you believe the quietest heart can tame the wildest storm, like, comment, and subscribe to Black Echoes for more stories of unsung bravery. Elena and James Jackson settled into Riverside Heights, a sleek suburb in Charlotte, North Carolina, chasing peace after years of high-stakes careers. Elena, 38, presented herself as a corporate security consultant, while James, 42, was an architect with 18 years crafting urban designs. Their life found a steady rhythm until Victor Reyes crossed their path. Victor, 36, posed as a private security contractor and self-proclaimed head of neighborhood safety. He acted as Riverside's guardian. For months, he was the perfect neighbor, helping James fix a cracked porch step their first week, praising Elena's manicured lawn. He invited them to block barbecues, touting them as the new stars of the community. His warm smiles and waves during evening strolls, his polished security SUV parked out front, reassured neighbors. They often said Riverside was lucky to have a real security pro in their midst. Everything changed when the Jacksons built a 5-foot stone wall around their front yard. They'd followed every rule: city permits, boundary surveys, neighbor sign-offs, all in order. City codes allowed walls up to 7 feet, but Victor's friendliness vanished. His waves stopped, and he stood on his lawn, arms crossed, glaring as the masons laid each stone. His sister, May, began dodging them when she walked her dog, hurrying past like they were trouble. "James, can you cut that wall to 3 feet?" Victor asked one evening, his security jacket crisp but his tone cold as ice. "It's a stain, dragging down Riverside's value from my office window." James explained the wall was for privacy, vital for Elena's confidential client calls. "I get it," Victor said, his smile tight. "But as head of neighborhood safety, I say we prioritize the community's image over one family's whims." It was the first time Victor claimed an official role. Before, he'd only bragged about organizing the annual street fair. A week later, a letter landed in the Jacksons' mailbox, printed on thick paper with a law firm's letterhead demanding the wall's removal within 30 days, or face $700 daily fines for violating aesthetic standards. The embossed seal looked authentic. Elena was in the backyard, running through a workout so precise it seemed military grade, when James showed her the letter. She wore black tactical gear, a small silver pin on her collar catching the light, a detail James hadn't noticed before. "They've got no case," Elena said, her breath steady despite moves no gym taught. "We have every permit." Her voice held a calm assurance, like she'd already mapped the legal terrain. James called the law firm. The receptionist said they'd never issued such a letter and had no record of the Jacksons. Someone had forged a legal document, a federal crime. She sounded concerned, asking for a scanned copy for their files. That night, Elena was quieter at dinner, checking her phone and stepping outside for calls she called client emergencies. When James asked if she was okay, she said her work had hit snags, but couldn't elaborate. A new edge sharpened her tone, unfamiliar to him. Victor began whispering to neighbors that the Jacksons were trouble, stirring division with their outsider ways. He held discreet gatherings at his home, inviting select neighbors to discuss how the Jacksons' wall was lowering property values and hinting their presence clashed with Riverside's traditional charm. His words dripped with coded prejudice, suggesting their culture didn't fit. Some neighbors, swayed by his authority, began giving the Jacksons cold stares, while others, uneasy but intimidated, stayed silent. Victor even placed a small sign near their wall reading, "Keep Riverside pristine," a thinly veiled jab at their race. The Jacksons found more notes, some scrawled with slurs, piling pressure on their doorstep. Neighbors who once chatted at the mailbox now avoided them. Mrs. Carter, who'd shared homemade pies, took her evening walks across the street. Notes appeared under the Jacksons' wipers, urging them to think of Riverside. One cruel note called them folks who don't belong here. Each was penned in a different hand, as if Victor had rallied a team. Elena spent more time in the backyard, often on calls filled with jargon like threat assessment and counter-ops. James saw her through the window, standing in rigid posture, speaking with an authority that didn't match the consultant he knew. He noticed things about Elena he'd overlooked. How she scanned every space they entered, always sat facing exits, her movements sharp and controlled, like someone trained far beyond corporate security. The tension erupted at Victor's emergency neighborhood meeting, held on the Jacksons' lawn one Saturday. Nearly 20 neighbors gathered as Victor stood by the wall, brandishing a sign proclaiming, "Head of Neighborhood Safety," launching a public shaming. "The Jacksons refuse to respect our standards," he declared, pointing at the stone. "This isn't just about aesthetics, it's about safety. A wall like that could hide criminal activity from the street." His voice carried the weight of unchallenged authority. From the living room, Elena watched, her eyes tracking each neighbor's position like a strategist mapping a war zone. Her movements were precise, nothing like the consultant James knew. Then Victor dropped a bombshell. "I've looked into our new neighbors," he said, oozing confidence. "Elena Jackson works in corporate security, and she's black. That's all you need to know about her kind." The crowd shifted uneasily, some stepping back. He continued, "For all we know, we're living next to people who don't fit Riverside." His words were crafted to spark fear, and they did, rippling through the crowd. That's when Victor crossed a line that would unravel everything. This wasn't about a wall anymore. It was about prejudice and a hidden agenda. The final clash came a week later, when Victor arrived at their door with 2 men in security uniforms. He claimed anonymous tips about suspicious activity and possible contraband in their garage. The other guards looked uncomfortable, as if unsure of their role. "Sorry, James," Victor said with fake sympathy, his hand on his pistol. "Elena needs to allow a safety inspection." His eyes gleamed with malice, a mix of personal hatred and calculated intent. Elena stepped onto the porch, her black gear marked by that silver pin, a CIA emblem James now recognized. "I'm happy to comply," she said, calm as granite. "But I need your warrant and legal basis for this search." Victor's smirk flickered. "We don't need paperwork for a routine safety check," he snapped, his tone thinning. "I'm a security contractor. I handle threats." Elena's posture tightened, like a soldier locking into position. "Mr. Reyes," she said, emphasizing his title, "every security action requires documentation. You know the protocols." Victor's face darkened, his hand inching toward his pistol. "Don't lecture me," he growled. "I've been protecting this place long before your kind moved in." His bigotry was laid bare, raw and ugly. That's when Victor Reyes made his worst mistake, because Elena's eyes held no fear. Only the cold, calculated focus of someone trained to neutralize far greater threats. That evening, in their living room, Elena removed her jacket, revealing a faded CIA tattoo on her arm. "James, I have to tell you who I really am," she said, her gaze unflinching. "I'm not just a consultant. I'm Special Agent Elena Jackson, retired CIA counterintelligence, training operatives at a classified facility." The truth shook James, rewriting the woman he'd married. 18 years in the agency, 12 in covert ops. I was assigned here to develop anti-terror protocols for a federal program. It's classified, so I kept it from you. Her voice carried the weight of countless secrets. Elena revealed that Victor's prying had raised red flags in her old agency. "He knows I'm in security, likely from gossip, and he's targeting us for my job and our race, thinking I'm just a corporate suit." Using her CIA training, Elena began investigating Victor. She hacked into public databases, tracing Victor's financial records and call logs, uncovering repeated contacts with a firm called Horizon Properties. Late at night, she sat at her laptop, cross-referencing property sales in nearby suburbs, finding a pattern. Families leaving after disputes, their homes bought cheap by Horizon. One case stood out. A couple in a neighboring town forced out after a zoning fight, their house snapped up for half its value. Elena's pulse quickened. This wasn't just Victor's prejudice. James helped, watching Victor's SUV from their window, noting his late-night meetings with suited strangers. Her instincts screamed of a larger scheme, but the pieces wouldn't fully connect, leaving her restless, torn between caution and the urge to act. The evidence grew. Victor's ties to Horizon Properties deepened, with cryptic talks of clearing the block and big payouts. But the full scope stayed just out of reach. Victor's scam wasn't new. He'd run it in other states. But when Elena prepared to report him, he caught wind of their plan. "We've got a leak," she said, her jaw tight. The next morning, Victor arrived with 3 real security guards, accusing the Jacksons of spreading lies to defame a community leader. "I'm sorry, Elena," he said, smirking. "Slandering a contractor is serious, and your evidence is tainted." He played the righteous official, and the guards seemed convinced, buying his racist narrative. Then May, Victor's sister, knocked on their door that night, wringing her hands, looking terrified. "I can't stay silent," she whispered, glancing around. "Victor's not a real contractor. We moved here after he was fired in Richmond for posing as a cop." May said Victor bought fake badges online and had bullied neighbors elsewhere. "He's targeting you because of your race," she admitted, offering receipts for his fake gear. She seemed to risk everything. A week later, James overheard May on her phone in her yard, thinking she was alone. "They bought it," she said. Elena shared their whole plan. "Victor, your scared sister act was perfect. The Jacksons had been played. May was as deep in this as Victor, perhaps deeper, because she was the better liar." "We're changing tactics," Elena told James after he reported May's betrayal. "I'm using tools Victor can't imagine." Her voice turned cold, predatory. Elena contacted Major Alicia Brooks, her former CIA partner, now with the ATF's fraud division. "Elena, this man's dangerous," Brooks warned on a secure line. "Victor Chen has 4 arrests for impersonating security and harassing residents. He moves state to state, running the same con." Brooks provided covert support, treating this as a major fraud case. With her help, Elena installed undetectable surveillance around their property, capturing Victor's every move with surgical clarity. The gear recorded everything: meetings, calls, schemes. The evidence grew. Victor's ties to Horizon Properties deepened, with cryptic talks of clearing the block and big payouts, but the full scope stayed just out of reach. Victor was about to learn he'd underestimated the wrong woman, because when you target someone trained to outwit global criminals, you're in a fight you can't win. Elena devised Operation Exposure, calling a community meeting, inviting every neighbor, including Victor, under the guise of settling the wall dispute fairly. The invite was worded to stroke Victor's ego, ensuring he'd show. Victor arrived in his pressed security jacket, fake badge gleaming, confident he'd dominate. He brought May, and they looked like they were celebrating a win. "Elena, I'm glad you're seeing reason," Victor said, his tone patronizing. "Let's handle this like civilized people. Before we discuss the wall, I have questions about neighborhood safety," Elena said, standing calmly before the crowd. She wore a sharp blazer, positioned to see every exit. "Victor, as our safety head, can you share your official contractor license number?" The question seemed simple, but Victor's confidence wavered. "That's confidential for security," he said, his voice tightening. "Contractors protect their identities." Some neighbors nodded, convinced. "Licensed contractors have public certification numbers," Elena countered. "If you're legitimate, it's standard." The crowd stirred, sensing a shift. Elena connected her laptop to a screen, displaying North Carolina's contractor roster. "This lists every active contractor in our state," she said to growing murmurs. "Victor Reyes isn't on it, and hasn't been for years." The crowd's whispers swelled. Victor's face flushed, but he stood firm. "It's a system error," he stammered. "Databases lag for sensitive roles." Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Actually," Elena said, pulling up a new file, "here's a receipt for a fake badge bought online, shipped to 718 Riverside Drive, your address, 10 months ago." The crowd gasped as the evidence appeared. Victor leapt up. "This is nonsense. Elena's forging this to ruin me because I called out her kind." His voice rose, leaning hard into his racist facade. "But the badge is just the beginning," Elena continued, unflinched. "Victor Reyes is Victor Chen, with 4 arrests in Virginia, Tennessee, and South Carolina for impersonating security and harassing residents." The screen flashed his mugshot and rap sheet. Neighbors backed away, realizing they'd lived near a criminal. May tried to intervene. "These are lies. My brother's a trusted contractor." But her voice faltered, and she kept glancing at Victor for cues. Suddenly, Victor pulled a pistol from his belt, aiming it at Elena, shouting, "Enough! Shut up, all of you! You don't belong here." His bigotry blazed, but something in his tone felt rehearsed, calculated. The crowd panicked, some screaming, others diving for cover. Parents shielded their children. But Elena stood unmoved, her eyes locked on Victor with a calm that froze the room. "Victor, you just committed aggravated assault," she said, her voice like steel. "You've made your worst mistake." In 3 seconds, Elena moved with a precision Victor couldn't match. She disarmed him with CIA-trained techniques, secured the pistol, and had him face down, wrists zip-tied, before the crowd could blink. "Victor Chen, you're under citizen's arrest for impersonating a contractor, assault, and conspiracy to defraud," Elena declared, in total control. "You have the right to remain silent. Use it." The crowd's fear turned to awe, then roaring applause. Someone live-streamed it, and the video exploded online, gaining thousands of views. Real police arrived minutes later, led by Detective Marcus Lee and Elena's contact, Major Brooks from ATF. "Exceptional work, Special Agent," Brooks said as her team cuffed Victor. "You've cracked open a major case." As Victor was led to the patrol car, he turned to Elena with a bitter smirk. "You think this is over? You have no idea what's coming." His words dripped with racial venom, but something in his delivery nagged at Elena. Too deliberate, like a performance meant to distract. Elena's instincts, honed by years in counterintelligence, kicked in. Victor's obsession with their race felt like a mask, a calculated ploy to mislead. She couldn't shake the sense that his bigotry was a cover for something bigger. With Brooks's support, she dug deeper, using CIA resources to trace Victor's ties to Horizon Properties. Elena pored over financial records, uncovering a trail of shell companies linked to Horizon, funneling profits to offshore accounts. She found reports of families across states, white, black, Asian, rich, poor, forced out after petty disputes, their homes bought cheap by Horizon and flipped for millions. One case hit close. A Riverside family, gone last year after a noise complaint, their house sold at a loss. Neighbors had blamed personal grudges, but Elena saw a pattern. The syndicate's operatives, like Victor, used tailored tactics, racism here, zoning fights there, to drive families out, masking a coordinated scheme. The community reeled, stunned to learn their squabbles were orchestrated, fueling their resolve to fight back. What she uncovered was staggering. A syndicate targeting thousands of families across 7 states, forcing them to sell their homes cheap through intimidation disguised as neighbor disputes. A sham real estate firm, Horizon, bought the properties, reselling them for hundreds of millions in illicit profits, while families believed they left due to petty conflicts like Victor's racist attacks. Riverside was one of dozens of suburbs hit, with over 2,500 families displaced and $300 million in losses from forced sales. Elena realized Victor's prejudice was a deliberate smokescreen, designed to make police focus on his personal hatred and miss the syndicate's broader scheme. His role was to sow discord, using tailored tactics, racism in Riverside, zoning fights elsewhere, to drive families out, letting Horizon scoop up their homes. They made every move look like neighbor drama, Brooks explained at a debrief. No one saw the bigger picture until you. Victor Chen faced 9 federal charges, including impersonating a contractor, conspiracy to defraud, and racketeering. May, his accomplice, was arrested for her role in the scam. Interrogations revealed the syndicate used operatives like Victor to target high-value neighborhoods, each with unique ploys to mask their true goal. Riverside's rising property values made it a prime target. They counted on people like Victor to hide the real game, Brooks said. Elena received a commendation from the CIA for exposing the syndicate. Their case led to the Chen Act, federal legislation stiffening penalties for impersonating security contractors and creating public verification systems. Elena was invited to consult for ATF's Community Defense Program. Riverside Heights transformed. The next community meeting pulsed with unity, not fear. Neighbors, once silenced by Victor's intimidation, now spoke freely. Maria Lopez, a retired teacher, proposed a new 5-member board with rotating leaders and open votes. No one should wield unchecked power, she said, and the plan passed unanimously. Mr. Patel, a 70-year-old pharmacist, stood up. I nominate Elena Jackson for board chair. She's proven she'll protect us. The cheers were deafening, but Elena declined, joining the oversight board. Leadership isn't about control, she told the crowd. It's about empowering others to guard their own. Her words became Riverside's motto. 6 months later, Riverside hosted its first Solidarity Day, with games, potlucks, and talks on community strength. Children played on streets once shadowed by Victor's threats. Visitors from nearby suburbs came to learn Riverside's model for trust and resilience. Local news hailed it as a triumph of ordinary people. Elena's role grew. She taught self-defense classes, led safety workshops, and launched a watch program rooted in respect, not fear. Parents asked her to speak to their teens about courage and justice. True strength protects, not dominates, she'd say. Kids idolized her, crowding her at events, begging for spy stories or cool moves. Elena emphasized awareness and speaking truth. Standing in their backyard 6 months after Victor's arrest, James and Elena looked at their stone wall, the spark of it all. Laughter rang from the new playground, built with funds seized from the syndicate, its plaque reading, "For those who defend justice." James asked, "Ever regret revealing who you are?" Elena pointed to a new sign at Riverside's entrance. "Riverside Heights, rooted in truth and unity." "Some secrets stay hidden," she said, "but truth protects what matters most." Children ran by, shouting, "Miss Elena! More training tomorrow?" "Not training," she called back, laughing. "Awareness lessons, after school." They cheered, racing to the playground, their voices filling the air with hope. As the sun set over Riverside, their story wasn't just about stopping one bigot. It was about exposing a hidden empire that preyed on communities, disguised as petty disputes. Victor Chen used racism to mask a syndicate's greed, but he underestimated a woman who'd spent her life shielding others. The stone wall still stands, no longer a flashpoint, but a symbol that the best way to protect what's yours is to hold fast when you're right. Every glance at that wall reminds Riverside that heroes don't always wear badges. Sometimes they're the quiet neighbors keeping the world safer, one community at a time.